Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. I am Nick Kanoki, the Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm very excited for a discussion today with Deke Smith, Executive Director of the Academic Interoperability Council. Before we get underway, we want to thank our ALN Platinum organizational member, Onuma System, for his continued participation in the ALN and especially our current BIM Storm series. Our other ALN patron members, we thank you as well for supporting programs like this, the BIM Storm newsletter, etc. And all our organizational members really make that possible. So thank you. And if you're interested in getting your organization involved with the ALN, please reach out and we would love to talk about how we can work together. Next Thursday, we have ALN Thursday at 3 with David Totman, Innovi's thought leader strategy at Autodesk, and he's also an ALN senior fellow. So don't miss that next week at this time. And with that, I will just say, if you're out there watching, please send any comments, questions, or feedback to the chat, or you can use the Q&A function of this Zoom webinar. Mike Bordenero, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Nick. How are you doing today out in Lander, Wyoming?
Excellent. Yeah, it's the sun's finally come out.
Well, the clouds are here in Chicago, but I'm very happy because Deke Smith represents a whole lot. This week we got to do a newsletter that talked about the BIM Storm that we're doing with Onuma Inc. and Jack Dempsey's paper with the National Institutes, the National Academy of Sciences, and say that Deke was going to be on our ALN Thursday at 3. And Deke and Kimon and Jack to me are like a triumvirate of thought leadership. Deke is, I just learned, was working with Kimon since back in the 80s. And he has been rode herd over all the companies that were trying to establish a CAD standard for the US government, and that kind of spread out around the rest of the country, and then used the same position to get a BIM standard going, but it wasn't just for the US, it was for international. And so now he has come to understand that an important element in leveraging the tools and processes that humanity is evolving at an incredible pace these days is through academics. And that's why he is executive director of the Academic Interoperability Council. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Deke's experience with BIM storms and a bunch of other things. It's so good to see you and talk with you again, Deke.
Thank you very much. I appreciate very much that everybody taking their time to listen in on. Hopefully we'll get some good dialogue going.
Yeah, we find that a lot of people are busy during their day at this time, but we get reports that they say they listen to it on their way home or, once they get there. So did I do a good summary about why you're involved in the Academic Interoperability Council?
Well, and it is the coalition. It's the Academic Interoperability
Coalition. Thank you.
That's okay, but that's all right. Not a big deal. It's really kind of come up through my entire career that education obviously is really key to being able to make any change in process that we the standard of practice that we have in our industry. So whether and some of this came from when I was working with DoD, we put together the national CAD standard and kind of gotten frustrated because it was taking so long for CAD to be implemented. Now we look back on it and say, hey, that's been there forever, right? And not so. It really took some time to get it in. And so one of the things I did was I switched from NAFAC. I was working for NAFAC, and after 22 years of working there, I went to work for the Army Research Lab as their deputy CIO. And ARL is the 14th largest computing center in the world. So, you jump right into the belly of the beast, if you will. And so then I became, but between that and then working at Deputy Under Secretary of Defense for Installations and Environment, I led one of the 5 threads for the business enterprise architecture, which was probably and probably still is the largest IT architecture that's ever been initiated. And we spent like $1 billion on architecture, trying how do we define how everything flows in the Department of Defense, identifying the authoritative sources for information and in all the people that needed that information. And the same kind of thing happens in the AEC world. That we have people that create information, and then we have people that we need to share that information with. And getting that information to flow is really kind of the critical piece of all that. And I think that's where we can kind of start talking a little bit about BIMstorm, because BIMstorm really allows you to share that information between lots of different players. We're traditionally in our silos, and one of the things we've talked about now is having T-shaped learners and T-shaped practitioners. And what that means is that everybody's still going to have a depth of knowledge in the area that they work in, but they also need to have a complete understanding of the whole life cycle process, where the information is coming from that they're using, and who else is going to need that information. We've got to develop a level of trust there to be able to get that information to flow. One of the rules I learned in IT was, if you have 2 databases with similar information, likely both are wrong. And so you've got to really, now we talk about the common working environment and some of those kind of things, and all those things are really critical to the success of this. I guess one other thing I might mention now too, that probably had the biggest impact on my thinking, was after I like I say, I worked for DoD for 30 years. While I was working with DoD, I was also volunteering at NIBS for 20 years.
National Institute of Building Sciences.
Yeah, National Institute of Building Sciences. And working there, and that's, we did the Facility Information Council, which then became Building Smart Alliance and things like that. And one of the projects that I worked on was for the Department of Energy. They had a problem where there were 80 different organizations providing credentialing for positions like energy manager, and there were 5 different positions they were looking at. And the issue was that nobody knew, that neither employee nor employer knew which of those programs were good credentials. So, some of them were really excellent. Some of them were, as good as like getting a PhD on the internet from some unknown university. So we had to try to fix that. And so we did this project with Professional Testing Incorporated, and went through and using ANSI standards and ISO standards. We went through and changed that whole process, developed job task analyses, developed knowledge, skills, and abilities, essentially a body of knowledge of BOK. And so that really kind of led to initiating and getting involved in the Academic Interoperability Coalition.
Oh, that's a lot. Okay, I want to roll back quite a bit. Usually we start with, how did you get where you're at in your asset management journey, and that you covered that. You mentioned BIMstorm as a way of showing how the information flows. It is also an educational workshop. It's a free workshop, and I don't think we emphasize that enough. It's to teach people how to deal with this explosion of information and how can you make sure it works.
Well, one of the examples there was that at the University of Oklahoma, Tammy McEwen, Dr. McEwen, put together got some money together and did a BIMstorm, where she demonstrated how the different classes could work together and then come together with a capstone project at the end and bring it all together, and which I think is probably one of the best educational examples we have. Unfortunately, it hasn't been repeated, but I'd love to see it repeated at almost every university.
So when Deke mentions the different schools. So the activity for that BIM storm connected architecture with different schools at the university.
Mhm.
And I think this was the other thing I was going to get to, is the T-shaped professional that you're talking about. So that has a foundation, but then there is a connecting element to other disciplines. Is that the right way of reading the T-shape?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So BIMstorm is definitely intended to create T-shaped professionals. And we're going to start using that term from now on, because it describes what all industries are facing, not just the architecture, engineering, and construction, but everything is more connected now. And that's different for humanity. We advanced because we created silos of excellence. That's one way everyone specialized. But now with the tool sets that we have, you have to have that foundation, but then connect to the other professions that affect what you're doing.
And I think one of the issues at the base of that is that, if you're getting a PhD, you can't get it in a broad subject. It's got to be very, very narrow and very specific. So the PhDs are experts in a single area. So, now what happens is that a university will go out and hire, a BIM practitioner, or any of the life cycle issues. And I say, I think the issue is not just BIM, but it's anything that's life cycle oriented. So asset management is life cycle oriented, TCO is life cycle oriented, BIM is life cycle oriented. So, but what happens is it ends up that you've got this one person that's teaching one class in this life cycle course, but they're buried someplace in the university. And we've seen, and so, how do you teach something that's very broad from one spot that's usually an elective even, it's not necessarily integrated into all the other courses yet, which is what we're, trying to see happen also. But we've got examples where it's buried in architecture, it's buried in engineering, one of the engineering professions or disciplines. It's also buried in construction sciences. It's buried in one school in business, in the business school. So it's all over the place. So the challenge to the student is to figure out where is it, and then the challenge to the instructor is to how do you get from one spot, get the concept across that this really affects everything, every class that you attend.
So one thing that we've done with BIM storms to try to promote this cross-pollination of information is focus on first responder activities. People are very attuned to providing all the tools and processes possible to help first responders achieve their mission without risking, losing their lives or being injured. Coming from the DoD, that's right up your alley.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's kind of why a lot of these things really make sense, and why they're we used to take a lot of this pretty seriously, because somebody is at the pointy end of the sword that you're trying to support. I know when we were at ARL and supporting these systems, that had to be up 100% of the time, because you couldn't have a soldier out in the middle of nowhere trying to get information and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're down for maintenance."
Yeah, there's cloud cover, so we don't. Yeah. So let's get back to the Academic Interoperability Coalition.
Yeah.
And, yes.
Let me go ahead and share my screen, maybe.
Sure.
And I can walk you through a little bit of the.
And before you do that, let me
Sure.
Set it up by saying that the Asset Leadership Network is establishing its ALN Higher Education Asset Leadership Board. That's what this BIM storm is. We're being very strong. We want to promote the use of asset management at institutions of higher education. They should be doing what's best. It only makes sense. And we also want to help them establish curriculum and training and continuing education courses to build capacity. And so we're definitely interfacing with Deke on how we can work together, how the tops of our T's can interconnect. So
Absolutely, absolutely. That, and I think hopefully that's the goal of this this effort today, to try to see how we can fit all this together.
yes,
Just kind of, going through a little bit of the there's, we got a lot of stuff on there as far as mission and stuff like that. But these are some of the universities that we're working with. We're working with about almost 90 universities now. I don't think I haven't updated this list lately, but there's a lot of different schools and then a lot of different organizations that we're also working with. And the key is that we're and just like you, I also will mention that all our meetings have been recorded, because just trying to get academics with all their class schedules and stuff like that to find a time when they can all meet at the same time. It's like I say, it's very similar to what your situation is. You're finding it. People have to listen at their own time. It's like a podcast almost. So if this comes up, there we go. So like the basis of what we're working on is the body of knowledge, and what we worked with on in version 1 was this chart. And you can probably at your leisure you can blow it up and see it bigger. But we looked at 4 different levels of implementation, and that was how do you plan for BIM? How do you collaborate and coordinate it? How do you manage it, and how do you do it? And then we also looked across the board at design, construction, facility management, and consulting. And then each of those we broke into entry level. So basically entry level is coming out of college. Mid-career is, how do you want to improve your capabilities over time? And then full performance or expert level is the high level. And then we divided that into organizational understanding, and then also specific project understanding. And we went through and did a Delphi study and looked at how people anticipated using these different capabilities at different times, and kind of filled out the chart. Just to get an idea of what's involved with the BOK, the body of knowledge, you can download this pocket guide that we have. That's one aspect of looking at it. You can also go to the Delphi page, and you can actually, there's a slideshow, but also you can get a copy of the Delphi study and look at all the different charts of how those different things are used. So I just wanted to kind of give, and then there's some articles and stuff like that too. So, if you get a chance later on, you can kind of take a look at that and see how all of it's going together. And what happens at the different universities is each of the universities has typically a committee with private sector organizations, and they decide what it is that they need is the way of knowledge from students graduating from the university, and knowledge, skills, and abilities, I guess, really. And then they put together the curriculum based on that. So what we're trying to do with the BOK is get a little bit more of a consensus, if you will, I guess, across the board of different schools, and saying, okay, what is really, the most important? What strikes me as much as anything is the level of implementation now of BIM. You've got,
so before you go expand
Okay.
on that, if
Okay.
you're done with the website, you can stop sharing
Sure,
your screen.
I will do that. Yep.
And let me tee up what you were going to say about what's needed to actually benefit from BIM, is to talk about, just very quickly address the subtleties between a building information model and digital twins. While a building information model is a digital twin, digital twin is more of a concept applied to everything, all of the assets. It isn't limited to the building. And one of the things that Kimon has always been advanced about is the ability to put assets into buildings and have them interface, have that information flow back and forth between a room that knows how much electricity it needs, and then suddenly the building knows how much electricity it needs because it's added it up from all the rooms. But you were going to talk about the knowledge that somebody needs about building information modeling to get started in a profession.
Yeah, and along those lines too, and you brought up things too in my mind. I'm bringing up things that's what a discussion is, right? A couple of sessions ago, we had Dr. Raymond Issa out of the University of Florida, gave a presentation on digital twins, which I thought was very good in that it kind of showed how the digital twin relates to BIM and vice versa. And I think as much as anything, there's so many BIMs that, an owner will require a BIM on a project, and then it gets delivered and gets put in a drawer. And so that's one of the things I think we're trying to overcome with digital twin also, is to be able to, that information that's been collected during design and construction, how do you actually use it during operations and maintenance and living with the building, with the facility. So that's, I think, it's very important that people understand that, we're not, digital twin is not going to replace BIM, but BIM is kind of the input, because it's being collected from a lot of different players, like say during design and construction. And then also it brings up a point with, again, how this all fits together with, say, with total cost of ownership. And that is that you've got, the decisions that you make during design have huge impacts on the entire life cycle of the facility. And getting back, a little with total cost of ownership, using that as a metric to be able to identify the values and the benefits of all these things that we're doing in digitizing our facility process.
One of the things that led me from the building industry to the asset management industry, which to me includes the building industry, is the fact that the only way that those items are not going to sit in a drawer is if the leaders establish the culture of total cost of ownership, or the culture of asset management, or the culture of digital transformation. That's the only way. And it's interesting that, go ahead.
That's why I think ALN is so important, because I think ALN is really the door into that C-level, if you will, those people that are dealing with the asset management for multiple reasons, whether it's taxes or whatever, depreciation schedules and all those kind of things. All this stuff fits together. And if we're all doing it independently, and we're just duplicating work.
Yeah, we found that the most important initial in the C-suite is the F, the CFO. Yeah. And nothing's going to happen without the CFO. So we're doing things to focus on that.
And again, that goes back to why I kind of look at the TCO.
Right. Total cost of ownership is going to be of great interest.
Yep.
So you were talking about digital transformation when you were in NAFAC in the 80s. And I think humanity is still dealing with the whiplash of moving from one age to another age. We're going from the Stone Age to the Copper Age in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And we haven't caught up with what's possible yet.
But, but that transition from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the, all these different ages, that was hundreds of years.
Tens of thousands, Deke, tens of thousands.
Okay. Well, yeah. And so, so for us to do it in a few lifetimes, it's probably unrealistic also.
That's why I see it as a culture issue.
Yeah.
And it's through academia that we can change culture, yet we need to change professional industry a bit so academia responds to the demand for this new process. So you're right in that pivot point of working with the professionals and academia.
And just trying to do it in one lifetime gets frustrating, you know.
So when are you going to come back?
You know, what am I going to come back as is the question.
Right. Yeah. Come back as a CFO.
Yeah, that might be better.
Yeah. So how can people, all right, one thing that I really like about the AIC meetings is the format. Will you tell us about the format?
Sure. What we're doing now, kind of the model we've evolved to, is having a program at the beginning, which typically lasts about 20 minutes, and then we really dedicate 45 minutes of the meeting to questions and answers and discussion about that presentation. And like I say, that all those meetings are recorded, and we do have them on the website. I've archived the last, only available this year, but for this year, but we can go back and get archives on the previous ones if you want. So we have kind of kept track of all of this, and really want to use that as just to see what kind of progress we are making, you know, and get some relative points as far as we go, because we've been doing this for about 15 years now, and we've had a meeting almost every month through that time period. What we have gone to now is just we lay off in June and pick up again in September, because the academics all leave and go on sabbatical and stuff like that for the summer. So we kind of regroup over the summer, but we've still got Carrie Dosick from Stokes Dosick from University of Washington is coming up, and actually the next meeting is with John Messner. He's going to talk about NBIMS and the progress they're making at the National Institute of Building Science on the national BIM standard and version 4 that's coming out shortly. And then we have, like I say, then Carrie is going to talk about what they're doing at University of Washington, where they have the College of the Built Environments, which is kind of moving in that same direction of getting, you know, across the board thinking. And then our last session this year is going to be with Patrick McClamey, who's the head of Building Smart International, and he's been involved, and he was also president of HOK, so he brings a lot of understanding of how all these things fit together also. So I think that's going to be a very, very interesting program.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. And then we spend the other half or the other 15 minutes doing our business meeting, which basically goes through and talks about, you know, what's coming up and what, you know, we're talking about doing a newsletter. We're talking about, like say, version 2 of the BOK and things like that. So it's pretty packed session, but it seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah, they're very highly informative, even if you're not involved in building information modeling or construction industry. There is always something to learn.
Well, and I guess I should mention, you know, we did a book also talking about our BOK and published through Wiley. It's Developing BIM Talent, and it's really, I mean, it's primarily, I guess, written for educators, but I personally think it would be good for any student trying to figure out, kind of navigate how they get a knowledge of this whole area, and that I kind of call myself the Howard Wolowitz of this, because I'm the only one that's not a PhD on the author list, but but you know, I'm just that engineer, architect guy that kind of tags along. And but I think, you know, one of the things we did try to do is tie it to what's happening in the industry, as well as, you know, how the academics develop those courses, because again, it's like that, you know, T-shaped practitioner, you really need to have a level of understanding of what they're trying to accomplish if you're going to get anything accomplished too.
I have moved, I consider, up from the building industry to the C-suite, the leadership industry, but I'm so glad to have the Building Industry Foundation and the BIM Foundation, because people understand the concept of house. And you
Yeah.
can show how you can avoid clash detection between electrical system, mechanical system, structural system, and they can get their hands around how this works in a house. But because it's digital, you can click and drag that house to the size of the House of Representatives, and then begin showing clashes between social, economic, and political issues that can be resolved when you visualize your information.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that using information allows you to be able to deal with a lot bigger problems, bigger issues. I also was involved with a group that existed for a while called the Center for Understanding Change. And, there after 9/11, there were models built of all the different, the banking industry and the petroleum industry and, all these different pieces, construction industry. And they were trying to look at how does information flow and affect these different facets of our lives. And the reality is, and you and I have talked about this before, I know, Michael, that we have the resources to be able to solve just about any problem we want to solve. It's just we may not have the, probably has something to do with the will to do it, but but it's all the pieces are there. It's just trying to put them together in the right way.
Well, I feel the will is stronger now. These things came out long enough ago that people understand that human evolution of tools is enabling us to communicate and address things. And it's probably through associations more than it is through governments that the professionals in all the industries will unify. And so I applaud your decades of work with associations and unifying people. And we want to sign a memorandum of understanding or whatever is required so that we can be listed on that AIC webpage. We'll get you on our webpage too and start promoting your programs and do some programs together.
Well, we're just certainly all working towards the same goals. So I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Deke. This has flown by way too fast. I always enjoyed talking with you, and thanks. So,
My
Nick, if you want to bring us home.
Of course, yeah. Again, big thank you to Deke Smith for being here with us today. And big thank you as well to our Platinum organizational member, Onuma System. If you want to learn more about Onuma System, you can go to that website on your screen or come to our next BIM Storm installment. Mike, is that in 2 weeks' time?
22nd is, we're doing Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern. And we had a great planning session yesterday. And people want to contact me for next Wednesday, but the next big public event is the 22nd.
Great. And just thanking our patron members as well for continuing to support us in these programs like BIM Storm, ALN Thursday at 3 in our newsletter, as well as all our organizational members. And we hope to grow this list. So please reach out if you're interested in working with us.
It has grown, Nick. I'm sorry I haven't given you the new
the newest logo.
Logos. I'm behind. People are really liking it and jumping in.
Well, that's excellent news, Mike. And one more plug for next week's Thursday at 3. That's March 16th with David Topman.
So Deke will like this. David was just with the American Society of Civil Engineers at a fly-in to Capitol Hill. And as soon as I learned that they had that, I was like, David, you got to come on and tell us what you learned about what's going on Capitol Hill. So that'll be fun next week.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nick. Thanks again to Deke, and thank you to all the attendees, and the comments are very positive. We appreciate that and look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yeah.